literally is fully open now. Fully open. In fact, bars, pubs, everything. They've got these social distancing norms and all. They can execute it very well, right? So that model is very different from a Mumbai kind of a
Yes,
model where
Mumbai
enforcing
and Delhi
anything
are
is
good.
like you got to think 10 times before you can hope to achieve anything.
Yes, very true. Nidhi, can we start? Uh,
Sure, sir.
sir, can we start now? Uh, Nitish ji?
Yes, we can start. Absolutely, I'm ready.
Great.
Great.
Nidhi, over to you now. I think we can.
Thank you so much, sir. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session with Industry Expert, where we will discuss the leadership skills that will be invaluable post COVID 19. A very well known fact in today's context includes few common statements like this is the time to upskill yourself, or now is the time to make sure you have those leadership skills which are needed not only now but in 3 to 5 years of timeline, and what not. Basically, investing in the skills that will be in demand in the future will pay huge dividends for your career trajectory in post-COVID world. On this note, we would like to hear it out from our guest today about what leadership skills and traits will be important in the post COVID world to succeed. Because as a manager, when you step into the business world, you will be need to hone these skills to become strong future leaders. So I take this opportunity to introduce him to the students, Mr. Nitish Asthana, President and CEO at Pine Labs. He has over 22 years of experience in senior executive roles across payments, fintech, insurance, and banking with large multinationals. Nitish last served as a managing director, India and Sri Lanka, as at First Data Corporation and Fiserv Incorporation. FDC merged with Fiserv in July 2019, where he led businesses across merchant payments acquiring, cards issuing processing, and banking technologies. Nitish has led the startup of two large life insurance companies, Bharti Exa Life and Aviva, as a founding leader at both JV firms. He led the establishment of the distribution platform in bank assurance, telecom insurance, and agency channels, led the founding partnerships with banks and corporates, and led the launch of new products. He also served as a director, bank assurance and partnerships at MetLife India, leading the dominant distribution channels for the company. We welcome you, sir. We are privileged to have you with us today, and we welcome you to this very special lecture today.
Most welcome, sir, and pleasure having you here, sir.
Thank you for the valuable time, sir.
Over to you,
Thank
sir.
you, sirs. Thank you, sirs, and thank you, Nidhi. If it's okay, I hope you guys can hear me fine.
Yeah, definitely, sir.
All right. Look, I love the opportunity to talk to folks who are just completing their education, stepping into their real careers, right? And why I like that opportunity is because we've all been there at some point of time, and it's really good to kind of share thoughts, and if I can help in giving small little inputs that will help you as you start your careers, I think we all have that responsibility, right? So look, I think Nidhi did mention what I've done in terms of my career, but as I was in the morning thinking about, how I should talk to this audience in terms of leadership skills, trying to pen down my thoughts, I think it was a very interesting moment because it kind of took me back to my own journey as over the last 20 plus years, right? And some of these things I do want to share with you before we get into this whole concept around leadership skills in the context of COVID-19. So look, way back in 1998, I had gone to B school. I passed out in 1998. I got placed in a bank, one of the multinational banks, and I was delighted. I was like, this is exactly what I wanted to do. My wife is also from, I am Lucknow, so she was my batchmate. We got married a year later, and she also got into another bank, which was very interesting. And I thought that this is where my career is going to go. I'm going to become a banker. And fast forward 2 years, I changed my job. I actually thought that instead of being a small fish in a very large pond, which is a multinational bank, why don't I do something which is a lot more impactful? And so what I thought is that, I should get into the insurance sector where, the licenses were just being handed out. There were a lot of companies forming joint ventures and starting up that business. I got into that field. I got a terrific opportunity to actually create two life insurance companies in India right from scratch, pretty much as a founding member, right? And I did that for, I think, about 10 years across three life insurance companies. It was an incredible experience, right? Lots of learning, lots of great impact that we created, right? And then in 2009, I decided to start up something of my own. And in that process, I spent close to almost 1.5 years trying to start up a wealth management company. And I would say that I failed miserably. I failed miserably because, what I thought would be an easy walk in the park for someone who spent 15 years in the corporate world was not the same. It was difficult to get to capital around 2010, just after the global financial crisis. And so I decided to get back into corporate world. I then got an opportunity to get into payments and fintech, right? To work for the largest payments company in the world, which is First Data. And that opportunity was great because it was a small franchise, a pretty unprofitable business that we had bought from ICICI Bank, and it gave me an opportunity to turn around that business. 4 years later, we did that, and it was an incredible journey. And then I went to Singapore to run Asia Pacific for all of our payments businesses across 9 countries. And again, the challenge there was it was a degrowing business, and how do you get that business back into growth? And we spent a couple of years and really worked very hard on the products and everything, and got it back into growth. And then I came back into India to run the India franchise. And the challenge was, how do we look at the payments business just around the time of demonetization, right? Which was, in a way, a crisis of its own. And we doubled the business over 2 years, right? So that was a very interesting entrepreneurial journey as well. And finally, here I am, landed up in Pine Labs. I did a very interesting transition in the middle of COVID from one company to another. That is an experience in itself, right? And the reason I did this Pine Labs assignment is because I truly believe that there is a massive opportunity to create Asia's largest and most respected fintech. That's why I'm here. Why am I telling you this? Is because of a few things, right? My learning over the last 20 years, which I want to share with you, is number one, that my best laid plans did not come through, right? In your career, it is very difficult to plan 10 years in advance. You can plan for 3 to 5 years, right? But what you expect is not how it turns out. Sometimes things are in your control, sometimes things are not in your control. And so it is not wise for anyone to plan for too long. What you should plan for is your flavor of the career rather than what you want to do or where you want to be. That's number one. The second lesson which dawned on me in the morning is that I have learned so much from risk and failure as we got into situations. I've had my fair share of bad bosses as well, right? You will too. And failure can happen because of that reason. My own startup failed. It did not take off, but I learned so much during that process, right? But the three things which really, really have held me in good stead, at least for me, everybody's journey is different. For me, number one is that I've always tried to be entrepreneurial. It is a misnomer to think that entrepreneurship is equal to startup. It is not. Entrepreneurship is equally valuable, is equally important when you're in a large corporation, a small corporation, an early stage business, a growth business, or a declining business, right? And I have seen my share of 3 or 4 types of different setups where entrepreneurship has led to a lot of impact. That brings me to the second point. I've always looked for impact, right? Where you can make a difference rather than just be part of a flow. So I failed miserably when it comes to cruise control. If you know cruise control, right? You got everything going very well, and you're just part of the journey. You're managing your team. You're raking in the dollars coming through. That's a model, at least for me, has not worked, right? What works for me is where some impact is required, some change is required, and so my model of career has been around impact. And the third one is linked to impact and entrepreneurship, is the mix of being strategic as well as executional, right? And you will think that, as people who want to get into your careers, strategy is super important, and we all want to get into strategy and consulting, right? If you're a consultant, then strategy is good. But if you're running a business, then you've got to be a leader who can think strategically, which means you can think, and you can do, which means that you can execute. So the model of being good in strategy or being good in execution in isolation has not worked for me. I have seen that the times when I've got the most credit or respect for something which has gone well is when I've been in the process of leading the thinking as well as leading the execution, right? So that's my model. Best laid plans don't come through. Risk and failure is super important, right? You got to focus on learning, be entrepreneurial, try to create an impact, and think strategically, and also focus on doing. Now, when we think about COVID, right? COVID's not the first crisis that has hit the world, right? There have been other crises before this as well, right? You had the 2000 dot-com crisis. You had the 2009 global financial crisis fallout onto global markets. You even had a crisis, if you can call it that, in some way. I think demonetization was a crisis which led to some level of demand-led crisis, right? But COVID is different, right? All these three crises that at least I have seen in my last 20 years had wide-ranging implications, but were isolated in certain parts of the world. They affected some industries more, they affected some industries less, they affected consumption in a different way, they affected supply side in a different way. COVID is very different. It is one of those generational change events or shock events, which you generally call black swan, right? Because of a few things, right? One, it has impacted nearly all sectors in a very profound way, right? All sectors. I would say that there are some companies, if you look at education technology, if you look at remote work, if you look at social media, if you look at those kind of technologies, those are the companies who have actually prospered during COVID. But barring those exceptions, it has been a far-ranging implication across the world, right? It has impacted supply and demand together. That is a unique part of this crisis, right? That not only have supply chains been disrupted, that people could not produce or deliver a service, but on the other hand, it has also impacted demand in a very big way, that consumers could not access products, or consumers did not need those products, right? Or consumers could not access the outlets from where they could get those services. So a combination of supply and demand is a very lethal combination. It is also unprecedented in the way that it has presented a challenge where companies, governments, leaders were totally caught unaware in terms of the magnitude of this issue and the speed at which it unraveled, right? And their preparedness to manage the disruption was tested to the hilt and continues to be tested. And it has presented managers and leaders and companies with extremely difficult choices. And I have been in the middle of those choices as well. These are existential questions around your brand, around your reputation, around your stability, around the health of your people, right? And those decisions kind of impact things like, how do I survive this crisis? So companies which were high growth companies till February suddenly had a survival crisis, right? Companies who were growing well suddenly had a disruption to their growth path. Employees and suppliers, very important, right? It has created very difficult decisions on how to deal with employees. Do we continue to pay employees? Do we continue to bring them into office? How do we create the right model of cost around employee cost and suppliers? Because at the end of the day, if we are paying someone obviously that person needs to pay someone else, right? That is economic. So if you cut off the supply of money to your employee, or you cut off your supply of money to your supplier, then it creates a much more kind of cascading effect in the economy, right? So that's a very difficult question. Shareholders and ROI, right? It's a very interesting piece that listed companies, how they have behaved during this crisis, where earlier they were very focused on their quarterly results because the markets used to reward them, right? And today, people are not talking about shareholder value in isolation. So a lot of leaders used to think of shareholder value in isolation, that I got to deliver to my shareholders, but they're thinking of it in the context of various other stakeholders, right? And we'll talk about that. And finally, your responsibility to the community, right? To the society, and how do you balance that out? So these are very existential questions. And as we come out of COVID, there are another set of questions that are emerging, right? How do we recover? What is the best model of recovery, right? How do we send people out? I was just telling Mr. Sharma that, the balance about keeping people in their homes versus getting people out there in a safe environment so that they can contribute to the economy and the business is a very important question, right? How do we prioritize? How do we prioritize capital? How do we prioritize what is our work effort in terms of execution, right? And how do we alter the business model, right? Because a lot of business models you will see in future, even in the very, very short term, have hit an issue around sustainability because of this crisis, right? So in that context, I thought I will talk about a few of the lasting and fundamental lessons in leadership because of this crisis. And I would say, why is it relevant for you? Because you're still students, you might ask the question, why is Nitish talking to us about leadership lessons, which probably the CEO of a large company would be more interested in? And I would tell you this. I would tell you that these lessons in leadership, first of all, are not new, right? They are just a reiteration of a model of leadership, which is important to consider. That's one. And second, as you get into your careers, you will be faced with such questions. You will be faced with such dilemmas, and you will need to evaluate. And this is not something that you will need in 15 years' time or 10 years' time as you become a senior level leader or a manager. Leadership starts from the time that you actually start interacting with people socially. That is my firm belief. If you are in your management institute, obviously some of you are leaders, right? You're leading a society, you're leading interest group, you're leading placements. So leadership is not a concept which comes with the seat. It is not a concept which comes with power. Those are elements, but leadership is something which comes with every single role that you will take as you get into your career, right? So I'll talk about, I think you should be interested in what I'm trying to tell you, I hope. There are 6 things that I will want to cover, right? Which I really believe have been reiterated or changed during COVID. First one, purpose, right? So many times you hear of companies being driven by plan, which means that what's your financial forecast, what is your vision, and what is your strategy? These are the drivers of leaders and companies, right? We should not confuse that with purpose. Purpose is a mission. It is the reason why we are in business, right? So I'll give you an example. My vision as Pine Labs is to create the best fintech company in Asia. That's my vision. But that's not my purpose. The purpose of Pine Labs is to be in the center of commerce, right? Which basically means that as the economy trades, as people buy, as people want to borrow, right? And as people exchange, products and services, we want to be in the center of it because we believe we have a role to play in the economy in terms of commerce. That is our purpose. When you think about that purpose, you suddenly think about that you're not trying to do it just for profits, right? That's not your only driver. As a leader, when you're talking about your purpose and your mission, then suddenly in times of crisis, you're talking about solutions and hope to your people, and you're trying to do it with an optimistic spin. If you're talking only about profits, then obviously when the profits fell in April and May until now, then suddenly you're not a great leader, right? If you know what I mean, there's a big distinction between being purpose driven and being plan driven. So that's my first point. The second one I would say is authenticity, right? I think people still do believe that, the best leaders are the charismatic ones and the dynamic ones and the alpha males. And that myth has been broken. The best leaders today are authentic. People who are authentic inspire confidence, right? What does authenticity mean? It means facing a difficult situation, you have a lot of ambiguity around you. You don't have all the data, right? You don't know the outcome, and you got to deal with the ambiguity while making sure that your people continue to feel positive and continue to feel inspired in terms of your purpose, right? So you got to be very candid. You got to have candor as part of your armory, right? You got to present yourself with humility, right? And that's not something which an alpha male can do very well. We all know that. You got to have empathy for people, right? When you take difficult decisions, empathy for people is extremely important, right? You've got to deal with tough decisions with a certain level of transparency. Okay, you got to establish the human connection. You've got to be consistent about facts. And I'll give you two examples, right? I don't know if any of you have read Brian Chesky, who's the CEO for Airbnb. I think his email to his employees did go viral. But if you read that email, there is a very important lesson in authenticity in that email, right? He's saying, look, we have to take a difficult decision, but it is not your fault, right? It is not because you did something wrong, but we have to take the difficult decision. And second, he dealt with it in a very humble, in a very candid, in a very empathetic way, dealing with facts and communicating very effectively, right? So this is going to be a time where authenticity will mean that you're not invincible. As a leader or as a company, you're not invincible. In fact, you're vulnerable. And therefore, vulnerability and authenticity is actually a strength. Dealing with ambiguity, with carrying people with you, is an extremely important skill. And another example is where through COVID, I think it was New York mayor. So while a lot of confusion was there around how the country was dealing with this crisis, here was one man who was doing daily press conferences, dealing with facts, transparently communicating to the public at large about what was going on and what the city was doing about dealing with it, right? That's an example about consistent fact-based communication. So I think authenticity rather than charisma is more important. Third, agility. And I want to take an example of my company, right? So at Fiserv, which was originally First Data, right? In January of 2009, January this year, right? So much time has passed. You think almost like, a few years have passed since this issue started. But in January, I led a BCP exercise, a simulation exercise with the BCP team globally, right? And the question they asked me in January was, what if the entire country had to shut down? Okay, and nobody at that time believed. This was end of January, actually early February. Nobody at that time believed that it could actually happen, that the entire country could shut down. What would we do? And we had offices all over the place. We had close to 12,000 people in India, right? And we actually went through the simulation of what if the country were to shut down. And you know where it came from? It came from one individual. The CEO of First Data was the man who had a plan if the World Trade Center were out of use before 2000. He was a senior leader at Citigroup, and they occupied many floors in the World Trade Center. And he actually had a plan on what to do if the World Trade Center were not in use, right? And this lesson told us that man came to us and said, prepare for it, right? Have a plan and prepare for it. So you got to have agility. You will have all the best laid plans, but they will not come through. I think that in terms of work from home and recovery, BCP activation, and the way to deal with ambiguity, so that you can do it with just enough information. You will not have all the information, but the skill is about being decisive and being quick and adaptable when you don't have all the information, right? I think the future is going to be about hybrid teams. It's going to be about boundaryless culture. Apologies. What do I mean by that, right? What I mean is that at least I believe that structure does not have a purpose by itself. Organization structure is only as good as the purpose it serves, right? So we've actually moved to a model where we want to get into scrum teams, where these are objective based teams where different talent is brought into the team to deliver an outcome regardless of the structure of the company. So I think going forward, as work from home and as remote working continues, hybrid nature of teams and boundaryless culture of organizations is going to be super important. Fourth, I will talk about is balancing your stakeholders, right? Now, I did say that, presented very difficult choices, right? Because how do you deal with employees? How do you deal with clients? How do you deal with suppliers, shareholders, and how do you deal with the community? If you have an existential crisis, which means that your survival is threatened, then you've got a very different set of choices. But I've seen this play out. I've seen this play out actually. If you don't have a existential crisis, then you've got to find a way that you're able to balance your stakeholder map. And I'll tell you why. Because stakeholders, whether it's clients, the community, your employees, will have a very long memory. So when you acted badly, right, they will remember it. They might not have all the choices today, but the moment the economy opens, there will be a lot of people who will walk out and desert you because you treated them badly. And I'm not saying these are easy decisions. I think that as a leader, you've got to be able to balance your stakeholder map, right? What do you do which is balancing shareholder value? How do you treat your employees? How do you make sure that your clients stay with you? How do you make sure that how you impact your suppliers? It is like a more balanced equation. Number 5, I will talk about resilience and depth. So here I want to quote, actually I don't want to quote, but I want to direct your attention to a very respected gentleman, right? So Pine Labs is, a majority held by Sequoia Capital, which is one of the leading venture capital firms in the world. Their Asia partner is a gentleman called Shailendra Singh, right? He's one of the most respected investors, having done over 200 investments in India, Pine Labs being one of them. You should go read his blog, which talks about a fork in the road in the context of COVID, a fork in the road. And basically he says that, look, this is the time when people will need to focus on building businesses which are resilient and deep, right? So the time of frothy use of capital, frothy valuations, where people used to talk about user base, is actually moving to unit economics, that you got to start focusing on unit economics. I think there is a lot of value in what a lot of people consider are traditional financial metrics, things like profitability, cash flows, active user base, revenue growth, instead of, the new age jargon that people have. So I think that, making sure that you're taking the company in the right direction such that the business model will be profitable and is headed towards profitability is super important. That really matters. And then of course, fiscal prudence, right? How do you do more with less? How do you make sure that you're improving productivity? Every dollar counts, every detail counts, right? You should go and look at that blog from Shailendra. He talks about resilience and depth. And I think the paradigm is going to change when it comes to startups, or the way that the markets are going to value companies going forward. And that's a very important leadership lesson for all of us. And the last point I will deal with is technology and digital, right? If I when I go to my kirana shop right on my street, I do go there like once a week because I like to get some air. I'm like trapped inside my house. So I like to go and take a walk, go to that Kirana store. And 2 weeks ago, I asked that guy, how much of your transactions are actually digital payments? Because we deal with digital payments, right? And the guy said that, look, before COVID, I used to have almost like 70% of my transactions which were cash. Today, 90% of my transactions are digital. Nobody wants to pay through cash. And I'm sure a lot of you, whether on campus or at home, would be dealing with this, right? We don't want to pay by cash. So suddenly COVID has provided an impetus to digital. It has provided an impetus to e-commerce. If you see the e-commerce trends, over the last 6 months, the only industry which has grown in terms of transactions is e-commerce, right? Most of the merchants that we talk to, most of the businesses and clients that we talk to, they want to modernize and digitize their supply chain, right? Small retailers are looking for digital solutions. Big companies are looking to power those digital solutions for small businesses, companies which are FMCGs or B2B players. If you look at companies like Udaan, if you've heard of a company called Udaan, it's one of the most valued companies today because what it does is that it kind of links the retailer with the supply chain into either an FMCG distributor or into a B2B distributor, right? Like someone like a Walmart cash and carry or a Metro cash and carry. And just by doing that and creating the digital infrastructure, they're clearly making a difference in the way commerce happens, right? Then you think about remote work, right? Remote work is all about digital. And you think about regulatory, right? KYC and the way that the regulators are thinking. If you think about cybersecurity, right? If all of this is digital and all this data is out there, then obviously cybersecurity is one of the main concerns. So the point around digital from a leadership perspective is that for companies who said that, look, over the next 5 years we will digitize, now they're saying that over the next 5 months we will digitize, right? And so therefore, if you as a leader or a manager are not thinking about digitizing, automating your client or your processes, then there is something wrong with your model. These are the 6 key learnings from my side. And, I want to close and maybe spend another 10 minutes on, how do these lessons relate to your life? I did say that leadership is not about being in a big job. Leadership is not being a CEO of a startup. Leadership is every time you interact with people, right? You're leading. So let's try and correlate, right? I think the few skills that you really need to focus on as people who are getting into their careers, number one is communication. You will have all the tools from an academic perspective, from technology and all of that. But in today's world, I think communication, at least in India, is the most underrated skill. And I will tell you this: you will always be a seller. No matter what job you do, you may say that, look, I'm not good in sales, so I want to be someone who is doing compliance. Let's take an example, right? But a compliance leader is selling to the regulator. Compliance leader is selling to his CEO. Compliance leader is selling to a client. Compliance leader is selling to the supplier, right? So the most unlikely job where you can think about selling as a component of a job, even that job requires selling. So invest in communication, be articulate, practice it, present, be prepared to present, listen to people, right? And make sure that you're heard, speak up. Presentation is not just about how fancily you articulate, it is about how clearly you think and how clearly you can crystallize your idea such that the other party can understand you well, right? And I always talk about this, right? If you are selling, then do you have an elevator pitch? I have a very, very effective tool. So when you think about communicating, you need to consider that people do have very limited spans of attention, right? You will sometimes have like literally 5 minutes to talk to someone. Sometimes you'll need to communicate a message in 1 minute. So remember, you'll always be a seller. And so practice articulation, practice communication, right? Second skill I think is going to be super duper important is data, right? what was a, let's say, a internet-led revolution 10 years ago. Today is a data-led revolution, right? There is so much data out there, and the second aspect of that, data comes to you from an economy which is mobile first, right? So if you want to really invest technical skills around data, you really need to think about analytics, big data, artificial intelligence and machine learning, cloud technology. How do you code on Android? What kind of technologies and how do the apps work? And the whole ecosystem around APIs. Now, why I say this is because at Pine Labs, we run commerce technology. We kind of sit in the center of the whole buyer, seller, supplier, financial institution, brands, right? That's our network. And as our customers are getting more digital, there is a clear need that you can actually supply real-time information to complete a transaction, and the only way you can do it is through APIs. When you think about lending, right? People are talking about democratizing lending. You're talking about account aggregator framework. You're talking about the OCEN framework that Nandan Nilekani regularly talks about. All of this is going to happen on the back of big data, on the back of AI, ML, and on the back of APIs, right? So the world of tomorrow, you need to, even if you're a compliance person, I'll keep going back to that analogy, or you're, a risk person, or you're a salesperson, you need to know these concepts, right? You may not be totally thorough and deep in it, but you need to understand and be able to articulate it. Third, be a leader. And I keep reiterating that leadership is about everyday work, right? What does leadership mean for you as someone who's in his 20s, right? I think leadership when you're young is a lot about being accountable, taking ownership, right? A lot of times you may think that, look, I'm way too junior, so why don't I just sit in the background and let somebody else do the talking, right? You need to take charge. The more you take ownership about a problem and its solution, the better you will be, the more you'll be noticed. Which basically means that you need to be communicative and you need to speak up. And I will tell you, look for authentic leadership, but be an authentic leader yourself. Okay? A lot of people say that, when I go to office, I've got a mask. That's not the model which is, I think, respected. I think you've got to be authentic so that your core values of what you are at home with your family are pretty much reflected when you are at work, right? So it is okay for you to leave that mask at home and do not wear a mask. Try to be authentic, incorporate candor and humility and respect, but you need to be tactful. Obviously, you can't do everything with just by being brutally honest, right? So I think that is a model of leadership when you're young. Create an impact, right? I don't think that you guys want to build a career. My model was, I failed when I was in cruise control. I succeeded when I saw an impact that needed to be made. And so I tried to do that, right? I think your focus should be that you should create something. You should try and be innovative. It doesn't mean that you have to create a product. You can solve a problem. You can change a process. And that for that to happen, you should be thinking critically. That means that status quo is not the only way to be. And therefore, you should be able to challenge, right? You should be able to challenge yourself and you should be able to challenge others as well. I tell you, I read this somewhere. I think this is such an important concept in terms of creating an impact. What I read was a great employee is worth 10 times a good employee, right? A great employee is worth 10 times, 10x a good employee, right? What does that mean? And I'm seeing this in my company as well, right? If I get someone who can deliver so much value to the company, to the client, I'm willing to pay them 10 times what I'm willing to pay someone else. You see this happen in industries like Formula One racing, right? The people who actually design the cars, the people who actually enhance performance are so well paid because they bring on board a skill that creates a 10x impact. And that's really, really important, right? So I think that you should not try and be ordinary. There is a chance for everyone to be special, but you need to think about challenging and creating an impact. And then I will tell you, I think it's very important to build relationships of trust, right? Whether you're remote working, I know it's difficult when you're remote working. I know it's difficult when you're just getting into your career. But my experience is that best opportunities come through your network of relationships. And of course, you will have layers of network. Some people you will have an acquaintance type of relationship. Some people you'll be talking regularly, right? But you need to have some relationship which are deep, some relationship which are more transactional, and that makes your network. And find a mentor. Very important for you to find a mentor. You don't have to do it tomorrow, but sometime during the next few years, you will stumble upon someone who truly will help you, will understand you, and will able to guide you when you are going through a problem. So I've had a mentor, and actually I've really enjoyed my interactions with my mentor. I do have a couple of mentees as well, and I take that as a responsibility, which is very important, right? And here, when I talk about network, I'm not talking about social media, right? I'm talking about actually knowing people. So it's, look, I have like, I think 3,000 people in my social network, but that's not my network. I can tell you. My network is a set of people who are who know me, who've spoken to me, who I can call, right? And a deeper network is a network of people you can actually go and trust. So you should have a combination of a network of people who are acquaintances, who you can talk to, and others smaller number who you can trust. And I think finally, I will say that you need to be resilient, right? Like companies need to be resilient. I think people need to be resilient. Your career, what you're trying to build is really equal to a marathon. It is not a sprint. When I got into the bank in 1998, I thought it's the best job, right? But my first job was actually sitting on the teller counter and counting cash, right? So perception is not reality, right? And you will work through the imperfection of what companies are. The best brands are also imperfect when it comes to their employees. But what I would encourage you to do is work towards excellence, right? I think you should not be ambitious about money, right? Beyond a point, I think if you have enough, money does not motivate you. It does not motivate you to wake up in the morning and go to office and do what you have to. But excellence does. That pursuit actually helps you wake up along with a purpose, right? And you have to accept adversity, right? It's happened to me. It will happen to you. You'll go through bad patches. You will have a bad boss. Some of you will get fired from a job, and it is part of. It's not in your control. It will happen, right? Some of you will hit a glass ceiling in your careers beyond which you can't grow. But I can tell you, if you're optimistic, if you know your authenticity, if you know your ikigai, as they call it, right, you will do well. So you need to be optimistic. So I want to close with, the final thing that I read a couple of weeks ago. Leadership in the post-COVID world is going to be leadership in a combination of using your head, using your heart, and using your hands, right? Which basically means that you need to think, you need to act, but you also need to be empathetic and sensitive towards the world around you, right? That's what I wanted to say, Nidhi. I hope I've kept to the time, and we can open it up for questions.
Very punctual, sir. I think it was a gripping session, no doubt. So yeah, we have few questions, sir. First question is from Samrat Motilal. He has asked that hybrid structures seem good for project-based jobs, but are they actually useful in big organizations with long-term goals?
I think that's a very good question, and they are very useful because let me take the example of my company. Right, my company is actually 10 years old, and here is a corporate which is trying to be a startup. What does that mean, right? It means that even in an established large company, the growth agenda and the transformation agenda will always entail things that you need to start up, things that you need to destroy, right? Things that you need to improve, and things that you need to decelerate. And this agenda will create programs which are going to be mission critical for any large company, or could be for small companies as well. And what I have found is that creating Scrum teams, which are multifunctional teams with an outcome, they're not democratic, by the way. It's not as if you can do whatever you please, right? That there is no structure. Everybody has a role to play, and there is a governance around it, but it is not following the formal structure of the organization. So let me take an example. We're building a lending product. So yes, we have a head of lending, but when we're creating that Scrum, we're actually putting two people from technology, two people from product, two people from risk management, a few people from bank, and lender partnerships. And when you create that structure, it's almost like a brainstorming, bootstrap world, that you sit in a room and you thrash it out and you whiteboard your ideas and you bring it into some sort of a structure, and then you create roles and responsibilities out of that, a project plan out of that, and then you create accountability out of that, and a time sheet out of that, right? It is extremely useful when you're trying to create something or you're trying to transform something, and I think everybody has that need. But great question, thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think Pallavi wants to ask a question. She's a PlayScore member, sir, and she's kept her video on. So go on, Pallavi.
Good afternoon, sir. So firstly, thank you so much for the wonderful, wonderful session. And it was so good to learn so much from your experiences and everything that you had to share. Thank you so much for sparing your time for us, sir. So, sir, my question is, so you yourself are a BCom graduate. And so you spoke about how data is going to be very, very important in the coming times. So how we as a non-technical student can enhance ourselves as far as data or technical skills are concerned?
Yeah, look, I think you got the grounding as highly educated people, right? And I would say I'm also a decently educated people. I went to SRCC, did my BCom, and when I went into IIM Lucknow, my first semester was like brilliant, right? Because you had all these accounting related subjects and all of that. But when it got to the more technical subjects around statistics and all of that, I did struggle a little. But once you've got the grounding of a certain level of educational, and academics as like a bedrock, it's not difficult to learn. And when I say data, I think that it's not just about having deep understanding about each of those fields, right? So there is like the practitioner and there is the expert, right? If you're a practitioner in most of the fields, or if you're a generalist in most of the fields, but you understand the concepts and can talk intelligently about them and can actually solve a question that comes through it, I think it's sufficient to be that. You can't be an expert in all fields. But if you really want to be an expert, then obviously I think you should buttress your qualifications with some courses which address some of these places, right? And if you go into companies, you'll be forced to learn. So your learning process will not stop, right? So if supposing you join Google and you're working on the cloud part of the business, then there is no way that you will not learn about the cloud, right? And that's the best learning you will have. So I think learning is kind of a process, right? If you really want to get into that, then you should really try to, collate a couple of additional courses in the curriculum or outside the curriculum, which can enhance, and then decide where you want to be a specialist versus where you want to be just a practitioner.
Right, sir. Thank you so much,
Thanks,
sir.
Pallavi.
So the next question is, do you see digital transactions and payments eventually diluting the purpose of physical banks? If so, then by when?
Yeah, look, I think it's a good question, but if you look at how banks look today, I would say they don't make any money out of cash anyway, right? If you think about the role of banks in the UPI system, it is absolutely critical because the customers at the end of the day have their handles through Google or through PhonePe or through Amazon into some bank or the other, because the banks are connected into the NPCI central system. If you think about services at the banking level, I think everybody's around the mobile banking. Mobile banking is growing like anything. ATM transactions are actually coming down, right? And if you think about banks like DBS in Singapore, right? Basically, what's their philosophy? Their philosophy is that people don't wake up in the morning to go to their bank. They don't, right? They'd rather do something else than banking. I think that is where the world is moving, that the world of banking is going to become so seamless that on your mobile, on the app, you're able to basically get all your services because the whole world is API connected into the bank, or the bank is API connected to someone else. You can take a loan, you can finance your business, you can make a payment, you can make an investment, right? And so the world of banking is actually far away from cash, and I do believe that banks have a very important role to play, even as the world is going to become digital. And I think if you see the stock price of some of the banks as well, the more they digitize, the better their stock price does, right? You can see that happening, right? In fact, the most valuable bank in this country is HDFC Bank, right? And at the center of their strategy is digital. If you see SBI and you see their YONO property, you only need one, right? That's a mobile banking platform. It is the largest mobile banking customer base which is out there, to the extent that they're kind of thinking about hiving it out as a separate business unit altogether. So it's not just about the fact that it is going to help banks thrive, right? It is central to their strategy, but is creating an incredible amount of value for the banks who are currently there. Now, the banks who digitize faster and who take a more collaborative approach of partnering with the ecosystem, I think will be quicker to adopt. The banks who find it more difficult to get onto that bandwagon, in fact, will struggle. That's the truth. Thank you for the question. That was a very good question.
So next question is by Mishita. She has said, sir, as rightly pointed out by you, communication is very underrated skill set today. How does one focus on improving such a skill set from the beginning of the professional journey?
Yeah, I think it's a very, very good question, right? I'm not going to address this as like, you need to read more, or I'm assuming that your verbal skills, see, the problem is not verbal skills. Even I get stage fright, right? When I go and talk to a large audience, there is a little bit of nervousness when you're talking to people, right? And so presentation skills is a lot about preparation, right? Is a lot about when you're going in for an important meeting, you need to prepare and get your thoughts together and structure your thoughts in such a way that you can cogently express them in a way that it makes an impact, right? So communication is all about thinking first and structuring, and then trying to make an impact to the listener, right? And communication is so much more about listening. I have this ex-colleague of mine who just would not allow anybody else to speak, right? And I remember when I did my group discussion way back in 1995, 96 or something, those were the times when you went for an MBA group discussion and nobody would allow you to talk, and the person who was talking the most would think that he's done the best, right? That's not the way communication works. Communication is a two-way street. You need to listen probably more than you speak, right? But it takes practice, right? And it basically means that you should get into, I'm sure that your institution offers you the opportunity of collaborating with people and then making sure that you kind of present as a group. Those are very important tools, right? My kids are in an IB school. They spend more time collaborating and working on projects with each other, because the fundamental tenet of the IB system is that when you go out in the world, what gets tested is your ability to work with others, not just your intelligence, right? So how you work with others and how you're able to collaborate and how you're able to express yourself as an outcome is super important. So it will take practice. If you want, you can take communication courses, but I think the best thing is that even if you fear it, embrace the opportunity of doing a webinar like I'm doing right now, right? Or speak in public. Embrace the opportunity, raise your hand when people ask you to present something, right? But it is the truth. You can't run away from communication. It is the most underrated skill, at least in India. I've seen it, right? And it is the one place where you need to invest the most.
Very rightly said, sir. The next question is from Vishal Agarwal. He has asked, the coronavirus recovery period will require people with niche skill sets to help restore businesses and economies back to their former glory. So, will these skill sets be a requirement for a long period of time, or these are crucial for the recovery period only?
It's a tough question, right? I honestly, I don't think anything is temporary, right? I think work from home, remote working is going to be a partial reality for a long time to come, which means that, earlier people used to say that, we don't like working from home. We don't like people working from home. We want everyone to come to office, right? Clients also used to say that if you want me to buy, तो मेरे से आके मिल तो सही यार पहले, right? But today the world is different. I think it is a lot more acceptance. I think the technology is available, and fortunately, internet bandwidth is pretty good in India right now, right? So some of these things are going to be here to stay. Productivity improvement, business process re-engineering is going to be here to stay, right? Because the whole model of resilience and depth requires you to be more productive, requires you to do more with less, right? So I think productivity is going to be here to stay. I think data and how data works and APIs work is going to be here to stay. It's a very long-term model, right? Of course, technology disruptions can happen. If I were in the pager world and I said, pagers are going to be here to stay, and somebody came up with a mobile phone, just 3 years down the line, then I would fall flat on my face. But I think the world of data is going to be extremely important to work through. So actually, you know what? I can't think of any path-breaking skills which are going to be temporary or ethereal. I think a lot of these skills are just being re-energized or re-recognized in this world of crisis. And I think companies are realizing that, resilience is very important. BCP is extremely important. We were one of the few companies who had very, very strong BCP processes. So when this thing happened, when the lockdown in Mumbai happened on, I think it was 22nd March, the next day, 9,000 of our people were working from home. 9,000 people without any issues, right? So, there are certain things which are becoming even more heightened, like controls environment, the way you manage risk, the main way you manage cyber security, BCP. These, I think, were lesser of importance in the pre-COVID world. They will become more mainstream in the post-COVID world. But if you ask someone who has run through various crises, right, these skills were anyway of importance even in the pre-COVID world, right? So look, this is not the question that you are objectively looking for, but I think that the skills that we are talking about, whether they're soft or hard, at least I spoke about, those skills are going to be super important in the world of tomorrow.
Agreed, sir. I think we'll take two more questions up, not taking a lot of your time. The second last question is, do you think the importance of marketing communication will skyrocket in organizations so as to influence consumer mindset post-COVID? And how does Pine Lab use marketing communication as a tool?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, right? In the post-COVID world, like in the pre-COVID world, marketing used to play a role of revenue growth or brand saliency or building out the reputation, right? These were some 3 or 4 different ways in which marketing used to kind of, play in. I think those are equally relevant for tomorrow as well. I think the factor of brand saliency and trust in a brand will become even more important, right? So where marketing used to be in a large way a tool that used to require marketers to report what is the ROI, I think the brand saliency aspect is going to be more important, because the level of trust as a factor in relationships is going to become more important. So I think more marketing money will go behind brand building. That's number one. Second, I think the media mix is changing drastically, right? And the ability for companies to be able to market into digital channels, right, is going to be super important, right? And the traditional marketing mix, media mix of being on TVC, being in outdoor, etc. Suddenly it's a little difficult to think about this as just like three mediums, right? Digital is a lot bigger now. So if you're thinking about marketing, then you must think about digital, and you must think about how to market on YouTube, how to market on Facebook, how to market on Twitter, and those kind of things, right? Obviously, there is this whole conundrum about how much of digital marketing. So, if you've seen the documentary, The Social Dilemma, you know what I'm talking about, right? How do you make the most use of social media without being intrusive and without kind of affecting your brand in a negative way? So that's an important thing to measure as well. So look, I think marketing has a role to play. More brand, get more skills around digital. That's going to be super important.
So the next question is, what gaps do you think prominently exist between V schools and corporates these days? And what could be done to reduce those gaps? Nitish sir, I think we have some network issue from his side.
So you're muted.
You might join again. Zoom पे check करो.
Hi, I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, I don't know what happened to the network.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So I was actually saying that at Pine Labs, a lot of it is moving towards our impact on appealing to consumers, not just businesses, right? So we are putting a lot of effort in terms of building brand saliency as a network in the payments industry, as a provider of commerce, as a provider of pay later services or EMI services. And in terms of where we're going a lot more into the digital media side. We're going a lot more into celebrity endorsements and building out a very unique and innovative, brand personality.
Okay, sir. The next question is, what gaps do you think prominently exist between B schools and corporates these days? What could be done to reduce those gaps?
Yeah, again, it's a difficult question, right? What at least my experience tells me is that there is a little difference sometimes in the way students perceive the corporate worlds and what they expect as the starting job. And there is a slight difference in expectation in the way corporates expect students to come in and start contributing. So I think that the answer to this is that from both sides there has to be an opportunity of providing a platform for the person to come and learn, right? Learn the ropes for a few months and then start making an impact. And of course, I think companies also, when they go to B schools, they're not expecting to hire just for roles. They're expecting to hire for talent, which obviously they want to groom and grow. A lot of times it doesn't help when you make such an investment and within 2 years people start leaving, right? And so it's not an easy answer, but I would think that um, you should think about the opportunity that you're getting if it appeals to you, and strike the deal. You should not strike the deal only because you're getting a job. On the other hand, I would also say that I think B schools and companies can work a lot better, together, to share ideas and to talk about, just like this forum, in terms of a proper model of interaction. I think a lot of work is being done there, and you can always do better on that front. I think we're over time, Nidhi. So if that is
Right,
okay.
sir. Yeah, I was about to say that, sir. So now I would like Pallavi to give a vote of thanks and close the session.
Good afternoon, sir. I am Pallavi Mishra. I am a senior member at the placement committee here at BIMTech and a marketing student. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you on behalf of all 200 of us who are attending this session today and who got to learn so much about the industry from your experience. I would also like to extend my heartfelt appreciation and gratitude to you, sir, for taking out the time and engaging with all of us in this wonderful session. It has been nothing short of an absolutely enriching experience that will certainly help us in calibrating and focusing our efforts in the right direction in these uncertain times. Thank you for taking out the time and being here with us, sir. Thank you for all your valuable lessons. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pallavi. Thank you so much to everyone for taking out an hour. I know it's difficult to listen to, an old fogey like me. As after 22 years, I'm talking to you. But it's been a good experience for me as well. I thank you to the professors and the coordinators who have helped put this together.
Thank you.
Okay. Good luck, everyone.
Nitish. Yeah, thank you, Nitish. It was wonderful, actually. I think quite good insight and quite candid. I think answers were there. Even the kind of insight you gave about the leadership during and post COVID situation. I think that's something very wonderful. I think they should be able to understand how you in that particular seat might be dealing with such kind of conditions, and how you think that things should be survived along this particular COVID situation to see the new sunrise, which is something like different from what's going on before the COVID situation. It's wonderful, I think,
Yeah.
interaction, and thank you
Thank you.
for giving
Thanks
us
very
time
much.
and being there with us. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks very much. Good luck, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.